Okay, so you want to own a laundromat. You've seen them. They're on every other corner in every mid-sized American city. Fluorescent lights humming at 11 at night, rows of white machines spinning in circles, and not a single employee in sight. Someone is collecting money from those machines. That someone is not working right now. You do the math in your head and it feels almost embarrassingly simple. People need clean clothes. They always have. They always will. You buy the machine, you lease the space, you put a coin slot on everything, and then you go live your life while the quarters pile up. That's the version of this business that gets sold to you in online forums, late-night YouTube rabbit holes, and every passive income course that's ever been monetized. Here's the problem. The laundromat business is real. It is one of the most durable small businesses in America. But the way it actually makes money and the very specific ways it destroys people who go in without knowing what they're doing is almost nothing like the picture you have in your head right now. So let's slow down and actually walk through this. You start with the acquisition. You're not building a laundromat from scratch in most cases, because the economics of a ground-up build almost never work for a first-time buyer. You're buying an existing one, and the moment you step into that market, you realize something immediately. Laundromats are not cheap. A small neighborhood laundromat in a mid-tier American city will run you anywhere from $50,000 on the absolute low end, and that low end should terrify you, because we'll get to why in a second, all the way up to $300,000, $400,000, or more for a well-run, updated operation in a strong location. The national average purchase price for a laundromat sits somewhere around $200,000 to $300,000 when you include equipment, lease assignment, and any goodwill baked into the sale. You're not buying a vending machine. You're buying a small business with real capital requirements, real liabilities, and a lease that is going to dictate the next 5 to 10 years of your life. Now here's where the $50,000 laundromat becomes a trap. You walk in, the machines are old but running, the lease is cheap, the seller says the place throws off $2,000 a month in profit, and he's only selling because he's retiring. You think you found the deal of the century. What you actually found is a timer. Those old machines, the ones from the early 2000s, or even the late 90s that are somehow still spinning, they are not a bargain. They are a debt you haven't paid yet. A commercial washer has a useful life of roughly 10,000 to 15,000 cycles. A commercial dryer, similar range. A busy laundromat runs those machines hard. You do not know where those machines are in their life cycle just by looking at them. A replacement commercial front-load washer runs between $1,000 and $3,000 per unit. A commercial dryer, roughly the same. A laundromat with 20 washers and 20 dryers that all need replacing over the next 2 to 3 years is carrying somewhere between $40,000 and $120, and $1,000 in deferred capital expenditure. And that cost is not reflected in the $50,000 asking price. The seller knows this. The seller has been putting off every repair, running the machines into the ground, and is now handing you the bill with a smile and calling it retirement. So you do your due diligence. You hire a technician to assess the equipment age and condition before you close. This is not optional. This is the difference between a business and a financial emergency. A proper equipment inspection will cost you a few $100s. Skipping it can cost you tens of thousands. You pull the service records if they exist. You run the machines yourself and listen for anything that sounds wrong. You look at the coin vault reports or the card system transaction history, because any laundromat worth buying has moved to a card-based payment system by now, and you cross-reference the stated revenue against the utility bills. That last part is critical, and most buyers miss it entirely. Water and electricity are the two largest operating costs in a laundromat, and they are also your best lie detector. A commercial washer uses roughly 15 to 30 gallons of water per cycle. Multiply that by the number of machines. Multiply that by the estimated daily cycles, and you get a water consumption number that your utility bill either confirms or contradicts. If the seller tells you the store does $15 news in a month in revenue, but the water bill is suspiciously low for that volume, one of those numbers is wrong. Either the machines are barely running, which means the revenue claim is inflated, or someone has been underreporting utility consumption somehow, which opens a whole other set of questions. The point is, the utility bills tell the truth about this business in ways that the seller never will. You get through due diligence. The numbers check out. You buy the place. Now you are a laundromat owner, and the first thing you realize is that this business runs on something that never shows up in any pro forma: location loyalty. Laundromat customers are creatures of extreme habit. A regular customer at your store has been coming there for years, sometimes decades. They know which machines run hot, which dryers take forever, which parking spot to grab. They have a relationship with that place that has nothing to do with you personally. And here's the thing about that loyalty. It is fragile in exactly one direction. You will almost never steal a customer from a competitor just by existing, but you will absolutely lose your regulars if you raise prices too aggressively. If the machines start breaking down, if the place isn't clean, or if the hot water disappears for a week because you didn't catch a plumbing issue fast enough. The business is stickier than it looks from the outside, but only if you hold the standards that made it sticky in the first place. Pricing is its own universe. The average wash cycle in the United States runs between $2.50 and $5, depending on machine size and market. Dryers typically charge $0.25 per 7 to 10 minutes. Those numbers have been creeping up as operators try to absorb rising utility costs. But you cannot raise prices in a vacuum. Your competitor 3 blocks away is your ceiling. If you charge $4.50 for a large wash and they charge $3.75, you had better be offering something meaningfully better. Newer machines, faster cycles, cleaner space, better parking, free Wi-Fi, whatever it is, because your customer will walk those 3 blocks to save 75 cents every single week. Over a year, that's $39 in their pocket. That matters to the demographic that uses a laundromat most frequently, which is working-class households, renters, people in apartments without in-unit machines. These are not people who are indifferent to price. And that brings you to the revenue reality check. A typical laundromat in the United States generates somewhere between $150,000 and $300,000 in gross annual revenue. That sounds like real money until you run the expenses. Rent alone in a decent commercial location can run $3,000 to $8,000 a month or more, depending on the market. Water and sewer are typically $1,500 to $3,500 a month for an active store. Electricity runs $1,000 to $2,500. Gas, if you're running gas dryers, adds another $500 to $5,900. Add in liability insurance, which you cannot skip, machine maintenance and repairs, cleaning supplies, any attendant labor if you're running an attended model, and a fund for capital equipment replacement. And you are looking at operating expenses that eat between 65% and 80% of your gross revenue, depending on how tightly you run the ship. The net operating income, what's actually left over before your debt service, for an average well-run laundromat, sits somewhere between $30,000 and $80,000 a year. That's the real number. Not the $200,000 in quarters. The $30,000 to $80,000 after the building, the water, the power, the gas, the repairs, and the insurance are done with it. Now you need to decide whether that number works for you, and that decision depends almost entirely on how you financed the acquisition. If you paid cash, which some investors do, particularly people rolling equity from a home sale or prior business, that $50,000 to $80,000 in annual net income represents a cash-on-cash return of roughly 15% to 25% on a $250,000 investment. That is genuinely good. That beats the S&P 500 on average. It beats most rental properties on a cash yield basis. And it does it with a business that has historically been recession-resistant in a way that very few small businesses can claim. When the economy tanks and people lose their jobs, they don't stop doing laundry. They stop going out to restaurants. They stop buying new clothes. They cancel subscriptions. But the basket of dirty laundry at the end of the week is non-negotiable. The laundromat industry saw its revenue hold relatively stable through the 2008 financial crisis and through the early months of the COVID pandemic once stores reopened. There is something almost comforting about selling a service that poverty cannot eliminate. But most first-time buyers are not paying cash. They're using an SBA 7A loan, which is the most common financing vehicle for laundromat acquisitions. The SBA program lets you put down as little as 10% to 20% and borrow the rest at relatively favorable rates. On a $250,000 acquisition with 20% down, you're borrowing $200,000 at current rates, which have been sitting in the 7% to 9% range, depending on term and creditworthiness. Your annual debt service on a 10-year SBA loan is somewhere around $28,000 to $32,000 a year. Now go back to that $30,000 to $50 zero in net operating income for a smaller or average store. Subtract your debt service, and you are left with very thin margins. Some months you are left with almost nothing. A single unexpected repair, a water heater failure, a transmission going out on your biggest commercial washer, a plumbing leak that requires tearing up the floor, and you are writing a check that erases months of profit. This is not a horror scenario. This is Tuesday in the laundromat business. The people who do well in this business, and plenty of people do very well, are the ones who understand that you are not passive in this industry, at least not in the beginning. The fantasy version of laundromat ownership is completely hands-off. The reality is that in the first 2 to 3 years of ownership, you need to be present enough to know your machines, know your customers, know your vendor relationships, and know your lease terms cold. You need to have a relationship with a reliable appliance repair technician before you need one desperately at 7 p.m. on a Friday. You need to know that your lease has a renewal option with a rent cap, because a landlord who can price you out of your location in year 5 can functionally destroy the business value you spent years building. You need to know that the building's plumbing and electrical systems are adequate for the load you're running, because a lot of older commercial spaces were not designed for the water and power demands of a modern laundromat, and you will find that out in the most expensive way possible if you don't check first. The operators who build real wealth in this space are almost universally doing one of two things. They're either running attended, full-service locations, adding wash-dry-fold services, delivery pickup, commercial accounts with local hotels or restaurants or healthcare facilities, which turns the laundromat from a coin-operated vending machine into a legitimate service business with real revenue per transaction and real customer relationships. Or they're scaling a single laundromat at $40,000 in annual cash flow. After debt service is a decent side income. 2 of them is better. 5 of them is a real business. The economics of laundromat portfolios improve substantially with scale because your knowledge transfers, your vendor relationships get stronger, your repair technician gives you priority, and your ability to negotiate lease renewals improves when you're a known operator rather than a first-timer. The people you read about who are making $200,000 or $300,000 a year in this industry are almost always running multiple locations, not sitting back watching one set of machines spin. The wash-dry-fold expansion deserves its own moment of attention because it changes the entire math of the business. A self-service customer might spend $10 to $15 doing their laundry. A wash-dry-fold customer hands you a bag of clothes and pays by the pound, typically $1.50 to $2.50 per pound, and the average order runs 15 to 20 pounds. That's $25 to $50 per transaction, handled by your staff, turned around in 24 hours. You are now selling convenience at a meaningful margin to a different demographic entirely. Dual-income households, young professionals, people who have money and no time. That customer is not the same person as your coin machine regular, and they are not sensitive to price in the same way. A well-run laundromat with a strong wash-dry-fold program can double or triple its revenue per square foot compared to a self-service-only model. It also creates something the coin machine never could: repeat, scheduled, predictable volume that you can actually plan around. The app-based and delivery laundry model, companies like Rinse, Poplin, and regional competitors, represents the version of this business that has attracted venture capital and private equity attention over the last decade. These are not laundromat businesses in the traditional sense. They're logistics businesses that outsource the actual washing to partner locations. They matter to you as a traditional laundromat operator because they are both a competitive threat and a potential revenue stream. Some operators have become fulfillment partners for these platforms, processing orders during off-peak hours when their machines would otherwise sit idle. Whether that math works depends entirely on the platform's per-pound rates versus your utility costs, but the concept is worth understanding. Because the people who are going to win in this industry over the next decade are the ones who treat their square footage and their machine capacity as a flexible asset, not a fixed one. The exit is the part nobody thinks about when they buy in, and it is the part that determines whether this was actually a good investment or just a decent job you gave yourself. Laundromats are valued on a multiple of their sellers' discretionary earnings, typically 2x to 3.5x for smaller operations, sometimes higher for larger or well-positioned stores. If you built the business up from $40,000 to $80,000 Zune an annual SDE over 5 years, you are looking at a sale price of $160,000 to $280,000 on that income alone, plus the residual value of your equipment. The people who bought right, improved operations, added services, kept equipment updated, and maintained their lease have genuine equity to harvest. The people who bought a neglected store, ran it flat, deferred maintenance, and are now sitting on machines that need replacement, are going to find that their exit price is discounted by every dollar of deferred capital expenditure a buyer's inspector can identify. You are not just operating a business, you are managing an asset, and that asset's value in 5 years is being determined by the decisions you make in year 1. The honest answer to whether a laundromat is a good investment is, it depends on exactly 4 things. The price you paid relative to verified cash flow, the condition and remaining useful life of the equipment, the strength and terms of the lease, and whether you have the operational discipline to run it like a real business rather than a vending machine you visit once a week. Get those 4 things right, and a laundromat is one of the most defensible, recession-resistant small businesses you can own in America. Get any one of them badly wrong, and you will spend the next 3 years learning an extremely expensive lesson about the difference between passive income and willful ignorance, dressed up as passive income. The machines keep spinning, whether you understand the economics or not. The question is whether the money they're spinning ends up in your pocket or covering the gap between what you thought this business was and what it actually is. That's the real cost of the laundromat dream. Not the equipment, not the lease, not the water bill. It's the price of going in with your eyes closed. Keep them open, and this business still makes sense. And if you want to keep building the kind of financial clarity that separates the people who build real wealth from the ones who just talk about it, hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.